Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Biggening Corporation. We are on episode 43. So that's exciting. I am not counting last week's partial stream since we definitely only kind of went over some of the things that we had been doing. And this week we're going to get back to our roots a little bit. We're going to do a little more on hand sort of things. Today we are going to focus more on something that was on my mind a lot is the fact that we're wanting to send email notices to the players in the system of how has the game gone over the past day or so. Do I know that people potentially want to get a daily summary of that email? I don't know, but at least that's an email theoretically one would be looking forward to if you're an active player in the game, right? But I wanted to do something a little different today. We could create a code unit and generate all the email information, and it would work. It would be self-contained code. But I've been doing a lot of stuff with Power Automate in the past week or two, and I was sort of curious, like, okay, what if we, for the sake of learning and consider it an exercise in just trying some things out, what if we just took the approach of making the data that we want to have in the email available via an API, which then people could set up a call against with their credentials, and then set up a Power Automate to run as a daily task that sends out the emails to the players. And I thought that would be at least an interesting thing to see. We haven't done anything really with APIs or Power Automate and Stream, and I thought that might be just a nice thing. For those of you wanting to learn more about the Power Automate platform, I know that the Biggening that happens later this week, if you were looking for the details on that, over on Twitter at mynavblog, Christoph has the info, and that BC Biggening can be found on Meetup as well. I think the focus this week is on Power. I'm pretty sure it's this week, or it's the next most one. Don't quote me on exactly when. But yeah, so that I think is going to be our focus today. We have some of the different pieces that we need, so it's a little bit something different, and I thought that might be a fun way to dive back in since I'm at the moment fighting a little bit with YouTube. Our Spare Brained Ideas channel has been deplatformed for being commercially duplicitous or scamming. I'm not sure why. And they just say you're against community guidelines. So, good stuff. Super excellent process on trying to figure that out, let me tell you. All right. So, one of the things that we did towards the tail end of last season was we had created a snapshot table that is capturing some information about the player's empire at that particular moment in time. And we're also theoretically capturing some information about the rankings of all the different players. And if we take a look in our tables for this, the snapshot table here, if we wanted, I believe we can just, because I am using a couple of different browsers and streaming and all that sort of thing, I don't always use some of the most efficient ways to do things because I would normally use the CRS run object to just run this table right from the Visual Studio Code environment, but I'm launching it into a different browser for data scrubbing and all that sort of thing. So a little different of a flow than we usually would do. So if we expand this up here a little bit and we come down, this was some of the initial data. Obviously that is bananas unhelpful, but we got a couple of, we got 3 days worth of data about 2 players towards the end of the last season when we had created some basic data. So that gives us enough to go on to do some Power Automate testing here. So if we filter on this, value here, we can see that we had player 5 on day 1, and then for some of, no, it's not even day 1's. That's fine. Across multiple days, we have 2 players. So this gives us some basic info about how they're doing, and most importantly, the total wealth and their rank at a given date. And obviously, this was a buggy chunk of code because those are weird numbers. So we can't super rely on this data yet, but we can, however, still make use of this for our API. So what we want to do is we want to present to an API for consumption the current game date, a list of all of the players by with their rank and their wealth by that game date, plus potentially maybe that info from the previous day, so we can show kind of up down tick arrows maybe, but that's maybe in the fancy side of things. So let's go look at our game setup real quick because I'm just curious. When we were running this along, our current game date when we stopped was the 4th of January 2000. So these entries right here reflect our current game date, and these entries here, because of a glitchy one, reflect the yesterday date. So that gives us enough information that we could build an API against it. I'm game to try it. So let's do some stuff with that. Let's tidy up all of these expanded folders because they just start getting to me visually. It's like having a cluttered workspace here. So we are going to make a new folder specifically for our API, just our API objects. Again, if you're new to BC development, folder structures can be a little loose. When this gets packaged up into the app file, it doesn't really pay attention to the folder structure. So many times, a lot of the extensions that you'll work with, the source folder might contain object types. I've done them by functional areas in this case. Some people might do these different functional areas as dependent extensions. That gets into some design architecture stuff, but what we need is we mostly need an API against a snapshot table. So let's do that. So I am going to make use of the, am I going to use the AL file wizard? I think if we were to make a new page, let's see. Yep, cool. Wasn't 100% sure if the page wizard had the API type. I thought it did, but it does. So great. Well, let's make use of it. Let's see. So we did object prefixes of BCS for all of our stuff. So let's just call this one nice and easy standings. There we go. And this is coming from BCS snapshot. And so our publisher on this is now Brain. Sure. API group, Biggening, and we're version 1. And the entity on this is standing and standings. Cool. And away we go there. So we have an interesting challenge here. The snapshot table does contain the data we need, but not really in the structure we need. So what do we want to do with that? Well, legitimate question. Let's just finish. So we've got the basic core structure of the object. Now, there's a couple different ways we could go about this looking at the data we have. First of all, we can do a filter to the game date to look only at the current season and the current game date, which I think see current season number. Let's just double check. This is partly me refamiliarizing myself with what we're doing. Okay, so we'll have to go get the only active season, So we know that we're going to filter on that season here, and then we get the current game date, and that's all good there. Cool. All right, so we are going to need to do a source table view. We are not, because we're going to need to do this in code, because we're going to have to go get the active season, and we are going to need to get the game date and apply filters for both. So trigger ahoy on open page. I keep wanting to do brackets for triggers. The mixing of brackets and begin end is... Okay, so we know that we're going to need to go get the, let's grab a variable record. We're going to grab the BCS season. It is not going to be temporary, and we are going to use short. Thank you. And we also need the game setup that we'll need here. So I'm trying to get in the habit of using all of our delightful extensions. That's taking some practice. And we'll do short game setup. Cool. All right, so we'll do a BCS games season dot set range on active. Now I have only vague recollections, but I'm pretty sure we put in validation code that activating a new season forces the other seasons to be inactive. So I think we can rely on there only being one active session, one active season at a time. So that's fine. And you know, if we do a find first and we don't get anything and it blows up, that's correct behavior. We could wrap this and give a nicer error. We could, but I'm not going to. For an end user, I would do so. Because, yeah, that would be the right thing to do, really. So we're dealing with a primary setup table, so we can just do a .get on that, primary key blank style format. And it's a good idea, even though we shouldn't need to worry about it, we should test field on the game date. Make sure that that's not 0. One thing that we would also potentially want to consider is the idea of bailing out if the game active was flagged off. If you recall here in the game setup, we had the ability to just turn on and off the whole game, just so that way there can be a global pause, which is why we don't have a giant massive data here. So all right, so now with both of those all tidied up, we can, on our rec, set range to the season, to the BCS season number. And for our game setup, we want to grab the game date, so rec.setRange on our game date to game setup, game date. All good there. Okay, so now that theoretically gives us the current standings. So before we go too far, let's test to make sure that this is behaving correctly. If you have not worked with APIs before and creating APIs before and calling APIs, well, there is a fantastic course for that. AJ runs it. I took it and I loved it, so I strongly recommend you do the same. Let's see, this BCS snapshot table, just to double check things here, this is a data per company false table. This is one of our cross-company tables, so we don't have to. I'm not entirely sure from an API perspective how we deal with cross-company tables, so that's going to be a fun and exciting sort of thing. So we have in Postman the ability to create collections if you haven't done this before, and this allows us to do HTTP calls, gets, posts, all that sort of fun stuff. So this allows us to test getting the game standings. So let's try this. I have some variables defined so that way I don't have to type out all the URLs every single time. You'll want to do likewise, but that is beyond the scope of this. Again, I would strongly recommend that you take AJ's course. So let's see here. We've got publisher group. I forget in the sequence of things if it's publisher, then group, then version. Not really sure if I remember. Maybe some brilliant person in chat will tell me. Let's see. So first of all, real quick, Postman lets you set some authorizations from the parent. So if we just call this, we will see no resource found. Okay. And that is because I didn't actually call an API endpoint. So making sure my API is responding. Yep, here we go. We get all of the companies. Here we can see the different ones that are in our system. So that is working correctly. So spare brain, Biggening /B1. And I have to remember what our workflow is on the calling of APIs. And I've got a slash ready. Yeah, we're getting lots of 404s. Alrighty, let me do a quick check on a couple of the other things I've done in the past for APIs, just so that way I can check things here. I don't think I have any /service /API. Okay, so yeah. All right, cool. I was checking in my super Patreon project. There's some things coming soon that'll be behind the Patreon supporter wall, so find out more about that on Friday. Anyways, here in our standings, so we do have the correct /API / and then should be giving us this. So let's see here. So we're getting 404s. Why are we getting 404s? Okay, so that gets us that. Pardon 1 second. Alrighty. Always fun stuff when you're trying out things you don't know. But if you're new to the stream, a lot of times I am trying things you don't know, and I hope it makes you feel a little bit better about your own experiments with how these different, how it feels to stumble around and what you're doing a little bit. So, yep, it's what we do. All right, it should have been like so, but it's not working. So, you know why? I know why. All of these things are fantastic, but they don't help you if you don't publish the extension. Makes sense, right? I think so. Okay, so that should be onward and upward. It's the first time we published to this particular image in a little while, so hopefully that went through with some reasonable quickness. My only unsure of is if I've gotten the publisher and group backwards, which that I do once in a while here and there. So let's try that out. If we do /Biggening. Negative. Okay. Okay. Did the publish succeed? It did. Good. All right. I really think it should be Spear Brand Biggening. There we go. Okay, cool. Took a little bit there to get us there, but that's fine. So we can see that even on our custom API, there are some things that are universal. Companies as a piece of information and subscriptions for push notifications are universal to the API system. So you can see here that we're dealing with a URL where we have to do the API and then the publisher group and then version. And we can see here that we get our standings entity, which that's cool. Now, here's another, I don't know how it works. Normally, you would have to do companies, companies to get the list of companies, get your company ID, put your ID in parentheses, and then you could call the endpoint. But this is an intercompany table, so I think we can just hit standings. And cannot process a request because you didn't specify a default company. Okay, so even though it is an intercompany table, we do need to supply a company ID. That's fair. And if we set in the service tier itself what the default company was, then it would use that. But we still need to give some sort of entry point. Cool. So if you'll see, hopefully it's reasonably visible. Let's scale up Postman a little bit here because I know sometimes it can be a little tricky to see on a stream. We have successfully queried our custom API and we are getting the season number, player number, game date. I believe that is the primary key because we didn't actually specify any fields. So even by not specifying any fields on our custom API page, it still forces you to expose all of the primary key fields. We don't have to do any work. So if you're looking to create a custom API page for a simple table and you just need to expose the primary keys, it's really just this easy. It's not too bad. Don't be frightened of the APIs. The built-in ones are a little bit of a different story, but just making a custom one, not so much a big deal. Okay, so that gives us some of the data that I was hoping to put into an email. We can tell that we have these players and we've got these seasons. This is a game date involved, but we don't have a few other pieces of information. I would want to see their rank, and I would want to see yesterday's rank. I would want to see their accumulated total wealth, and I would want to see yesterday's wealth. So some of those are fields that we can just add right on here, no problem. And if you've got extensions installed in your Visual Studio Code, we have the AZAL DevTools to add some fields, nice and simple. So let's do our rank at date and the wealth balance. There we go. And we get the nice and simple pop in for us. And I'm just going to call those. This is an API page, so it adhered to the captioning style that you would need, which is locked and also follows. There's probably a proper name for the casing of this. A little fuzzy about the camel versus. I don't know all the case names. Sorry. So that's cool. That gives us the rank for this game date and it gives us the wealth balance, but it doesn't give us compared to the prior game date. Now, an interesting bit of challenge is that what I would want to see as a player is I would want to see if we got in a daily email what my rank was at the time of the last email to be the prior. So we don't really have the right info in our snapshot table because we have the game date, but we don't have a timestamp that is equal to when this actually was accumulated. So we can't really give someone a 24-hour. So for the moment, we're just going to show the prior game date, and we'll call that prior date rank and prior date wealth. And later we're gonna add, if depending on time of the day, because I'm trying to keep these to an hour, so that way people can fit things in. So we're going to calculate those. Those are not data points that we need to store. We just need to get them. So we're going to do prior date rank, and this will be the integer because that's what it is, and it'll be prior date wealth, which I believe is a decimal. Yeah. Okay. So that way we've got those, and then we can do a trigger on after get record to go get the prior. We are going to grab some additional data from our BCS snapshot. And we're going to grab, for the same player for the same season, the previous game date. So there's a couple of different ways we could do that. We could calculate the date minus 1 day and step back. We also have this in here as a primary key. We want the same season player number. We just want one game date prior. So we can technically do a find previous. That would work just as efficiently, if not more. It's less steps. Potential for error. So, we would have to think about that. Like on day 1, this would have to properly go, nah, there's nothing. So let's do that. Let's do the BCS snapshot. And this is another reason that I love the prefix suffix thing. It makes IntelliSense so easy to use. BCS short. Okay. So here we can do BCS snapshot, set range on the season to the rec season. And we can do BCS snapshot, set range to player on the record player. And what we're going to do is we're going to set range on the game date. Is this the right way to do it? So a small little decision branch. Option 1 is that we could do rec.gameDate. We could do BCS snapshot.find to get onto it. And then we could remove the filter. And we could go back 1, which you just do with next, -1. Looking at that, I don't like that. It feels very kind of icky to me. So our other option on that would be set range on the game date to calculate. You could, as a developer working in English in US date region and all that sort of fun stuff, you can take their advice here and say -1D for dates and all that sort of stuff. But the thing about that is that if you then run this system in a French or a German environment, guess what? This is not going to calculate correctly. If you have not done this before, you need to wrap your calculate constants with these braces. That'll make them multi-language. That was a fun learning experience as a US-based developer starting to work on a global stage. Suddenly all my calc dates and all my objects were wrong. So do them right from the beginning. And now we can do game date on here. And that's a much tidier sort of thing, I think. We still need to do record motion. We've set a filter, but as always, if you set a filter, you still are responsible for moving to it. So we can just do find. I'm a little fuzzy on the difference between find and find equals. We could also say, I think the tidiest way to handle this, I think the tidiest way to handle this is to use this option and then say if BCS find first, then begin, and we'll set the prior date ranked equal BCS snapshot dot rank a date and prior wealth. And this enables us to more gracefully handle the else scenario. So we can say prior date rank, and we'll force these to both just zero out. So that way, if for some reason their player just started, the game just started, if there's something gone awry, then we have something that handles that. Cool. All right, so that's all nice, but we still haven't added those. We've created these variables, we've got references, but they're not actually in our data set. So let's do prior date rank. And we'll do caption on these, because gotta, and we'll do prior date rank. I believe the locked equals true is needed so that way when you're dealing with multi-language, the caption here will not be translated regardless of the call, because after all, we're dealing with an API. It shouldn't change all of its field names just because of the language of the user. Believe that's the logic there. Okay, so now when we publish, almost forgot to publish. Would help. Now when we publish, and this should go a little bit speedier this time. In theory. Maybe not. There it goes. Okay. Wham. There we go. Now we get season number 2, player number 6, game date, and here is their rank at date and their wealth balances. Cool. Okay. Is that accurate to our data? Let's see here. Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. So yeah, our data set's not the best for seeing it because they stayed the same wealth and ranks, so nothing terribly exciting to work with, but at least now we've got a data set. So now theoretically someone could query this API and get all the info. I would also think that we need to set our source table view equals order by, I don't think we have to rec here, but I do think we need to say the field name. Okay. A little hazy on the source table view. Order ascending. Okay. Sorting. Interesting. I haven't done a lot of typing of the source table sorting, so sorting by ranking. Thought that was, oh, that's the name of the key. Interesting. Why is the ranking by wealth balance? We should have a rank by date. So let's add a new key here. Game rank is the name of the key, and the primary key will still be on there for season and player, but what we really want to see is by season and rank at date. Because we'll always do the season filter first, so that way we get the right info, and then we'll sort by the rank at date for a given. Yep, because we'll do game date after. That's okay. I just want the season number to be prior to this to really hone down the indexing here. I think that'll be good for performance. Not that we're going to have millions of records, I would hope, but hey, that's all right. Okay, so with that, we can grab these fields, pop those in there, and there we go. Save all, and publish you. There are lots of shortcuts that one can use that I am not using on camera, like, as you saw when I did Control-Shift-P or F1, taking a long time to get that habit. Many of these commands have shortcut keys. I have a lot of programs running as part of streaming, so I don't always know what's hijacked by some of the streaming programs, so I don't necessarily always use all of the shortcuts that I would on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so I mean, there's no real functional difference here because 6 and 7, we still see the sort here in that way, but in theory, we would get our first rank, second rank, on down through the bottom. I might, between now and next time, import some better data in there for testing. But what we have now is we have some basic info that we can utilize to do some Power Automate against, and we've got about 20 minutes before I would try to wrap up. So let's see what we can do. I admit, let's see here. Now, for those of you who have not worked with a whole lot before, welcome. Yeah, you and me are together. Normally what I would do is I would set this up as a scheduled cloud flow, so that way we could say that this repeats every one day at, I don't know, let's say it's a end of the evening sort of thing, 8 p.m. presumably local time. And what we're going to do is we're going to do beginning send standings. Great. So if I were to truly rely on this, one of the first things that we would need is to go fetch our player list, because that's going to be who all the emails are going to go to, and we'd have a for each process to send those all to each of the players. I'll see if that fits into the time for today, but the concept will be the same as some of the stuff we're going to be doing here, so it's not too crazy. All right, so the recurrence is set up. We need to add a new step. If you've not worked with Power Automate before, it's all about, I liken it to coding in the Scratch UI programming sort of thing, but these are all building blocks that you can use to do different things. So we are going to go fetch some data via HTTP. We are going to hit up a URL where we are going to do get, and let's grab that part, and we'll grab, and I'm hard coding the company name, and I'm just going to live with that. Sorry. Now, one of the things that we would need to do to be able to successfully complete this query is we do need to do an authentication method. The right things to do would be to do some Active Directory OAuth or a client certificate. Those are far more secure. This is a dummy test company. I am therefore going to use basic using just a web access key, which I will drop in off screen for a moment, because as much as I don't mind sharing the URL, I don't think you guys need to be testing against my test database at the same time, and I think it's okay to obfuscate that part. So okay, so with that set in there, we now have the ability to go fetch just like we did in Postman. And if we look in Postman, what you get back is a JSON body. And in that JSON body is a array of values, because it's a list type page. I think even with cards, you get just a single value in an array. It's a little funky. Occasionally it's a little clunky to work with, but what we need to do is extract that array of value into a variable. So we're going to do a new step where we're going to compose think that's our jam here. We're going to compose the body. No, let's step back one. This is my inexperience in Power Automate. Pardon. There are a bunch of things that we're going to use often, some of which are a little buried. I just wanted to point them out if you're new here. We're going to use a lot of the built-in operations. There's obviously control flow. There are some good data operations that we make use of. We just use HTTP, and we're going to use some stuff around the variable functionality. So I'm going to initialize a variable that is going to be an array. Ooh, yep, it's the I need coffee time of day. So now what we need is we need the, from the body of HTTP, we need the value. So because this HTTP call, it knows that there's going to be a body, but it doesn't know that there's going to be a value in there, we have to extract that out. And the easiest way for me to do that has been so far to use an expression here. And I believe it is outputs, and we're going to pull from HTTP. I believe this is what I'm going for. And we're going to do the value parameter of that. And I always get that, but then it's fine. So, real quick, one of the things we can do is we can save this. It'll tell us if there's something wrong, but there's nothing wrong, so we're good there. So let's do a quick test. Manual test. And we want to run the flow. And then we confirm that we wanted to run the flow. And we come on in here and we see that we are theoretically initializing this variable, name standing, to a type of array. I don't think that quite did what we needed it to do. Let me go check real quick, because I tested out a flow with Biggening just a little bit ago. Yeah, I thought we needed that compose step. Wonder why. Impose. Fine. Okay. Sure. I don't. If any of you watching or Power Automate people hook me up with an explanation of what's the scoop with why do we need to do a compose here to get the value out of here. I don't really understand what compose does. All right, so let's get the outputs of compose, and we're going to grab the value. So here, this outputs compose is returning to us a JSON. So we can just do the string-based notation of telling it that we want the value property of that JSON object. We have to save it before we test it. Learn that a lot. It's very weird from the BC world to go back to having to hit save to do things. But I pretend to myself that it's publish. Okay, so now we can see that this little initialize variable standings is at least getting our array of all of the info with the season, player name, blah, blah, blah. Cool. All right. So now we theoretically have a JSON array variable. And what we need to do is this contains a lot more information than we specifically want to clunk down into an HTML table, which is the goal. I want to make a little HTML table that goes out in an email. And the reason for that is because Power Automate has a nice JSON array of objects convert to an HTML table step that we can use to feed into an email body. And what it will do is, as long as the array of objects all have the same columns, then it builds this nice beautiful HTML table that work with, and that makes it nice and simple. But you do need to make sure your properties are all useful. So I obviously don't need to give the e-tags to everybody. And we can see right away we have another issue here of we have the player numbers, but we don't have the name of the player's company. So when you go to read this email, you're going to have to mysteriously just know all the integers of everyone involved. So that's pretty terrible. But we also don't need to see the season. So we have a couple things to clean up. We need to go get the player company name. So let's go grab a new, we got to be careful with this. If you use company name, then you can confuse yourself quite a bit because that is a built-in commonly used thing. And when I built this, I think I built them as text 80, but they can be display name, can be 250. So we got to do that. So on after get record, we need to go to our players table, which there. So short doesn't make a difference. I'm using non-standard object names. So we're gonna on current record go grab bcs player.get. Which I believe the primary key on this is just the player number, which we have as a field. So easy peasy. And I'm fine with it blowing up if we are unable to get a record. Something has gone terribly wrong if that happens. So cool. There's the player company name, and I believe bcs player.company display name. This I'm pretty sure is a flow field. So let's calc fields, grab that, and we can go check that with a quick go to definition on that, and display name, flow field. Yep, perfect. Okay, so we want to add to our API, and it doesn't matter for us here where it goes, but if we want to be nice and lazy when we're building the workflow up here, it would be a heck of a lot nicer for us if the player name was at the beginning of the list of all the different entries. So yeah, let's pop that in there. Cool. And let's see here. So we're going to grab the player company name, and I'm going to try to hurry up because there's 10 minutes left there. We're going to do that from the variable, and caption equals that, and locked equals true. Okay, so there goes that. We need to publish that because otherwise we won't have it. Now, the other thing we need to do is we need to get rid of yeah, just these three. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we are going to edit, and we are going to add a step that now we've got these array of objects. We're going to do a new one here that is a control that is our for loop, and they called it apply to each rather than for each, which let me tell you, when you go to search for things, I've just given up typing search because they used all synonyms for things that aren't even remotely what I would expect. Like apply to each. Okay, so for each of our standings, we want to do a bit of a step here. What we need to do is we need to use a function that is available to us from the expressions to remove a property from each object. The challenge to that is that I don't know if we can set the this is where I get a little fuzzy about things, so pardon. I think there's probably a smarter way to do this, but what we want to have Sorry, let me clarify where I'm getting a little stuck. If we try to apply a function like remove property to this object, uh, Power Automate does not like the idea that you are modifying your input. It basically doesn't let you modify a variable within the same step that you're feeding a variable into. So what I've been struggling with a lot lately is I will need to take a variable, do a processing onto a new variable, and then replace the original variable with the thing that I made. A strange little flow. I doubt that I am doing that correctly. So if there are brilliant Power Automate people who are going, oh gosh, no, what you're saying is terribly wrong, tweet at me, like tell me that I'm terribly wrong. I would prefer to be wrong about that. So please do. We're going to create a new cleaned standings. That is also going to be array, and that'll be an array of our tidy objects later. This you'll notice is already becoming a little clunky because you'll see that it just says initialize variable 2. This is a really good place to start naming the different action steps so you can find things later. So I tend to say init the variable standings, and it is type array, so I don't have to wonder where I'm looking later. We're going to init the cleaned standings array, and we are going to create a temporary object here via our init, and we are going to cleaned row, cleaned row. That is going to be an object, and this needs to be initialized blank, so we are going to rename this init cleaned row object. Type. Okay, so now for each row in our each object in our standings array, we are going to apply the following options. We are going to set, in our variable here, we are going to set the variable cleaned row to equal remove property. I don't know why autocomplete on this sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So that's fun. Let's see, remove property, and I believe we pass in first the property that we are removing from, which is our item, and we are going to remove the property named odata.etag, I think was our, it's at odata.etag even. Here's hoping that doesn't break the operational flow here. Okay, and then once we've got that cleaned row, we are going to append, in this case this is equivalent of our push, I believe, append to array cleaned standings our cleaned row. Okay, so now the problem with this is that we're only able to remove one property at a time, so let's see if that actually does what we need it to do. If so, then we have to kind of run through this workflow again for each of the properties that we want to get rid of off of this OData object. There's probably a smart way to do this using some of the built-in JSON filtering compose steps. Yeah, it does not like, so if, in case it's hard to see, let me zoom this up here. So we've got a flow run failed. If you've not done this before, when you do a test run, it'll show you each of the steps, how long they took, and where it fails. And it failed here in our apply to each on this action. When we were doing the set variable, it complains that the set variable inputs the provided property name at odata.etag has these invalid characters dot. The name cannot contain dot. So even their odata functions look at this bizarro at odata.etag and throw up a little bit. Fair. So let's see if we can find a different way to do this, because I'm not sure if we can, and I'm sort of running out of time for today. If we add an action, there are some built-in handlers around data operations. Let's see. So I think maybe we can get select. If we select from our item the current thing that we're iterating through, which I think is available here in dynamic content. Yep, current item. So if we select from each item and we wanted to say, pardon, I'm going to drag this off screen so I can see it on my other screen here. If we wanted to say, we're going to map this to, and we can, this is the new JSON object that we're going to make, and we can call this something prettier. So we can say map to company name, and we want to map this from the property, which is item, and question mark is a nice little wrapper there that if the property for some reason does not exist, then we're okay. We can grab player company name from our current array, and it always complains, but it's actually fine. We then say today's rank today, and we'll do expression item. And this is rank at date. Cool. And we'll do wealth today. I'm just going to do this last one, and then we'll make sure that that worked, and then I can do the rest of things off camera if this works fine. And we have wealth and balance. Cool. All right, so we select all that in, and instead of append being up there, we can just click and drag this down below here. And now we can say, instead of appending the cleaned row, which this set doesn't work for, we can instead append the results, the output of our select composition. And we can remove that faulty step. So in theory, after all of these have been appended to clean standings, we should just have a JSON array of objects with these three properties. And with that in mind, we can then do an Outlook. We can send this from a shared mailbox, which is pretty cool. Mail shared, which I'm going to do. My company, we've got a nice little no reply service account bot, and I'm just going to do this to me. As mentioned, what we would do in the actual workflow is we would have all of the player emails, which we would create a separate API endpoint for, and we would have all the player emails that we would then apply to each of the player emails to send the today's standings. And hey there, Biggening fan, here's the latest. And we can add dynamic fields. So we can add in this dynamic content, we can add, I'm not sure why it's got all of those, but it doesn't have the variable. It's a little weird. Let's do a save real quick. Come out of this. It has to finish saving before you come out of it. And go back into edit. And down here we should have the clean standings array as a variable, but we don't. Okay. I'm not sure why. You know why? Because it can't take an array. I forgot. We need to do the extra little step in between here. There is a convert to HTML table, create HTML table that we need to do, and we'll do that from the clean standings. And now here in the shared mailbox, not this variable, but instead the output of that. There we go. Whew. Okay, so it's all saved. Let's test. Run flow. Preparing to fast forward. Preparing to prepare to fast forward. And fast forwarding. Okay, so we have allegedly the flow is running, but the action failed. Oh. We don't have to do a select statement against each property. The select statement will work on the array itself. So we can skip looping altogether, and instead of having to do all these different steps, we could just add this action. Hang on here. Let's grab this select statement right here. We can move this, copy to clipboard, and up here under the compose step, really, we can come all the way back up here. We don't have to do a lot of these other operations. We can do the select right up here against, nope, we want it, there we go. We could pull the value just like that here in the select statement. So we're going to do that. So outputs, and I'm going a smidge over, but I think everyone wants to see this actually, work. So we're going to go with it. Shouldn't be much longer. We're going to wrap up shortly. Okay, expression is invalid. No, it's not. There we go. Okay, so outputs, compose, value, outputs, compose, value. Yep. Okay, so now we don't need the standings array. Delete. We should name this something useful. Scrub the array, just so we know what's going on there. And now we don't need any of these variables. Don't need to exist. That's fine. We don't need this one. That's fine. And so this select statement is really powerful for us because we don't have to do all those different little steps. It's doing that for us. So that's great. I swear I just told you to do that. It might not be letting us because we're depending on something. Okay. Well, the create HTML will rely on the output from the scrub the array action and our apply to each. Now will you go away? Yes. Okay, so that's a much cleaner workflow. Thank you, select statement. Select statements are great like this if you don't need the content to be dynamic. So I've had to do situations where I needed the content to be dynamic, and that was a whole different thing. Okay. That's all green checks all the way down. I was trying to figure out why my phone buzzed, and here we are. So, today's standings. Hey there, Biggening fan. Here's the latest. Company name, blank. Rank today, 3. Well, today, but okay. So, that is all correct because the player company name table, that flow field isn't actually configured correctly, or the display names for the test companies aren't correct. So let's go check that and verify that, make sure that those come through correctly, and then we'll call today a good wrap. And we've built a basic Power Automate against a custom API. And yes, when you log back in after running a table, it's trying to load a temporary page, and that does not get you anywhere. So if you get this something went wrong. Can't build the metadata for this 95.99. Yeah, no kidding. It's fine. Not an actual error that we should worry about. So we head off to our companies. Whoever wrote the language matching on this search, hats off to you. That's some impressive fuzzy level matching. Okay, so if we edit the list here, and let's say Alpha Mega Corp, and then we Titans of Beta, I don't know, and then Big Game Arrays, sure. Okay, so now if we run this flow again, which we can come back here and just say run flow, run as fast as you can. And interesting, company name is still blank. Okay, so there's something afoot with the player table here. It should be getting a display name, but this is more just the API and how the data is connecting up, not an issue there. So we'll check to see. It's probably something simple here. Well, there's the company display names. So why? Hang on a sec, because this will go bug me if I wrap today and I've not solved this weird little thing. So if we do BCS player, get player number, and we do calc fields on company display name, what's the sitch with? Because that should be correct. Our API should be returning this. We're doing on after get record. Created a variable. Didn't populate the variable. Calculating the fields doesn't really help us if we don't do that. There's our. Often, it's something easy. If you are off coding on your own, find a rubber duck. Explain the code to the duck. Okay. Do we get some data in our API now? We do not, because publish. I'm also, throughout the stream so far, I have not committed yet, so I will need to do that to get things tidied up. I think there were kind of a couple of hanging episode 42 code changes that have been sitting around uncommitted this whole time. Dun, dun, dun. And there we go, Titans and Beta, the gamma rays. Good, good. So now when we run this flow again, we should see run succeeds, and hopefully we can wrap on this. So it's not necessarily faster or slower than coding it yourself. There are some definite perks. We can see here, HTML table. There are some definite perks to using Power Automate for some stuff. Some of these little things like the select and spinning up an HTML table from an array of objects, those are pretty nice little power tweaks, and there are lots of different ways that you can do stuff like that. One of the things I'm a little fuzzy on still is how you turn these into packageable solutions. So for example, if I were to export this right now, you'd get my URI and credentials and all that stuff. You can solve the credentials issues using Azure Key Vault for sure. I know that one, but I'm not sure about if you wanted to change the URI. But then you could theoretically export stuff, and it creates a zip package with the workflow that you just made. I don't know necessarily what how that all plays out. So there's some strengths to it. I'm still looking for the. I've been using a hammer for 20 years, and someone just handed me a power screwdriver. It's going to take me a little bit before I start to wrap my head around when to use which. So, and I suspect some of you will be in that boat as well. But we have achieved the objective for the day. We have the ability to set up a scheduled run every night that will automatically send an email with this standings table out. There are some fluff things that we can add to it, like, the prior date stuff. I skipped over that just in the interest of time. And as mentioned, we would probably want to have apply to each workflow against a separate call to the players table to go get all the emails, and then we would send the email to each of the people and that sort of thing. So a little bit different there, but I think this will probably be a fine wrapping up point. The only downside to this is that if I now give people the Biggening Corporation extension for Business Central and they want to run this internally, the daily email system has to be set up separately in Power Automate. So I'm still challenged to find the utility of this for if you're not making a per tenant extension and you're making per tenant Power Automate solutions. If you're making something that you wanted to be a repackageable thing and someone else can use all of these different pieces, I want to bring the code into the system and have the job queue run a nightly job that does an email. So I might do a test run sometime in the near future and go, okay, if I were to try to do this same workflow and produce an email with all these standings just inside of Business Central using, say, like the SMTP code unit, does it take me an hour or does it take me 10 minutes? What am I looking at? What will the differences be? So it'll be an interesting comparison. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting. We haven't done API work before on the stream. We haven't done Postman work before on the stream. We certainly have never touched Power Automate. I touched it for the first time 2 weeks ago. So a lot to learn. But yeah, okay. Well, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Central European Time, we'll be diving into some Kronos Foundation's architecture planning, and on Friday we'll be doing It's Not a Sprint. We're going to be talking about some new stuff. So definitely join us on Friday because there are going to be some fun things. So hopefully I will get a YouTube platform back between now and then, or create a new one between now and then and start over. I may ask people to subscribe to the YouTube channel that we create or resurrect between now and then. So until then, see you all later, everyone.